For those of you who are new to this gig, this is how it goes. My name is Elysabeth Alfano, and I invite 3 celebs who don't know each other and a prominent chef who cooks for them, and over food and drinks, the unscripted conversations flow. So what I think you really have in common is this sense of fearlessness in what you've chosen to do. So I'll start with David, but for all of you, I'm wondering, what is it that makes you want to be out on a limb like that?
Well, I don't know that it's, I don't really look at it that way. It's pretty fun.
For you, but don't you think improv could be scary? I mean...
Well, yes, there's an element of uncertainty to it, which I enjoy. But like if I was merely terrified, I don't think I'd continue to do it. But that comes along with it. And also, I guess I just like the way my brain works while doing that, and it doesn't seem to work that way in any other setting.
What do you mean by that? That's interesting.
When improvising in front of an audience, my brain works differently. That's all. It just, and I cannot seem to replicate the way it works in any other setting.
Are you improvising now?
No, this one's all written out. At the end of these remarks, I will be starting anew.
Right, it's like rapid fire creativity under deadline, and under immediate deadline. Like,
yeah,
you can't just be like, I don't really feel like being funny right now. I'm on stage. Never mind, guys. See you. I'm leaving.
Yeah,
like you
right.
just have to bring it.
Yeah, but I think also some of the pressure's removed because that's not what all we're doing is we just have to be. We don't have to be funny. Funny will probably happen, but we just so a lot of that pressure goes away. When that pressure's there, it's rough. When you think, oh gosh, I got to be funny right this moment. That's a tough job. Like stand-ups, that's a tough job.
Did you ever do stand-up? I thought maybe you did.
Yes, poorly, but yeah. I did it enough to have gotten better than I was.
Would you go back to that?
No, it's difficult for me. It's difficult for me. That's just terror for me.
Well, because you have to perform. What about you, Rebecca? Do you feel like you're out on a limb? I mean, your book took you 10 years, so you're investing. It's true, The Immortal Life of Henry Little X took you 10 years.
11, actually.
11, so you're
Not
investing.
Not that I was counting. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, everything about writing in some ways is going out on a limb because you don't know, is anyone ever going to publish it? Is anyone ever going to read it? Is anybody going to like it? Like, you just have to go into it expecting that it might not work, both in terms of you might not be able to get the story you're trying to get, you might not be able to get a publisher interested, so it's all a big leap of faith, and it's all just driven by obsession. I mean, it has to be in a lot of ways that you just kind of don't have a choice but to do it. And for me, the sort of putting yourself out there, my mom is here tonight, I'm sure she sort of chuckled at the risk-taking. As a child, there was certainly a part of me that did some sort of ridiculous things, so I've always had there was some level of fearlessness as a kid. And now when I look back at some of the things I did to make the book happen early on, it's like, wow, that's kind of crazy. When I finished the first draft of the book, I did things like driving into the middle of nowhere where there was no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and just started knocking on people's doors, not really knowing what to expect. Just sort of a woman alone in the middle of nowhere. And definitely, there was a few minutes where I was afraid when I got there, and it sort of took me, I drove my car up and down the street a couple times before I was like, okay, I'm getting out of the car. But I never thought about not doing it because of that. And then when I finished the first draft of my book and I showed it to my father, who's a bit of a worrier, he read it and he just went, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't know you were doing this. Like, I knew you were working on this thing, I didn't know what you were doing to get it. And it never struck me as being crazy or dangerous. People ask me all the time, weren't you terrified? Like, when you went and met that guy who killed somebody in broad daylight on a street corner with a steak knife. Like, wasn't that a little scary? And it sort of was, but I was so obsessed with finding the answer. And that's the thing for me. It's always about just what you have to do to get the answer.
It's funny because people ask me sometimes of like how I got to what I'm doing, and I always say, well, of course I'm afraid, just like everyone else, but the desire to discover supersedes the fear, and so I just sort of keep going. What about you, Chris?
Well, I think, for a critic, you're actually most, people think that we are more vulnerable when we don't like something, right? And I actually think the reverse is true, that the moment when you're most vulnerable is when you really like something. So I've been doing this job for many, many years, and I can count on the fingers of one hand when someone has said to me, you know that show that you thought really sucked? It was really great. People almost never say that. What they say quite frequently is, I cannot believe you like that David Pasquesi show. What a piece of crap that was. I can't believe it. So the moment you're out there liking something,
That's interesting.
I know it's sort of counterintuitive, but it's
Yeah.
true. The moment you're out there liking something is the moment where you're most vulnerable. I always
Yeah,
say.
I have not put you in that position of vulnerability.
No. Not recently.
There's a reason I'm sitting between them, I think, just in case there's any.
Keeping the fist from flying. Well, how much trust is necessary in what you do?
Trust?
Trust in, yes, trust in.
Never heard the word.
As a critic, you're unfamiliar. Well, just that the faith that you're going to put your opinion out there and that it's going to stand alone and there aren't going to be bad repercussions for if you're completely off the mark.
Well, the reviews I regret most are the ones where, for some reason, some factor intervened in my honest response.
Like you loved the director and
Yeah, I mean, I would admit about 10% of them, but there have been times when for whatever reason, I've not told the truth. I can't believe I'm really saying this in
I was
public,
just going to
but
say.
there have been times.
When we record this, I love that you're saying.
There have been times. I'd say 10%'s a bit much, maybe 5%.
Right, yes, we'll scale it back.
1%.
Could be 3, yes, could be
Rarely,
right.
rarely.
Almost
Only
never.
once. Only tonight.
But those are the times when I've regretted it. So if you honestly just see things, you know, and the thing about criticism is that art is time bound, so that what's great on one day is not great on another. So if you look at your activity, David, I mean, your art, I think it's fair to say, has a high failure rate. So I say all the improv I see, a lot of it fails. Would you agree with that?
I would. I would. I don't know that I would suggest that what TJ and I do has as high a failure rate. And I'm
So stipulated.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, a lot of improvisation is not very good, plain and simple. Even when it's a lot of improvisation is not very good. But there are some ways to improvise where you can more ensure greater success. And like you were saying, the times that you regret, what you regret is not telling the truth. And that's when a show can, for whatever reason, something intervenes and you're not reacting honestly. And that's when a show goes off the rails. So when we're attempting to do that, I don't think if you've ever come, have you ever come and see TJ and I?
Yeah, a number of times. Yeah.
Sorry, hands in the room. How many people have seen TJ and Dave?
A million times.
1 million has it.
That's great.
Yeah, but have you seen us eat it?
No, I can't think of it. It's been no. I mean, I saw you in the very early days of TJ and Dave, but no.
Would you
But I've seen a
admit
lot
it
of
if
it.
you had?
Yeah,
Would this be one of those 5% of times
No,
that
I
you
would tell
maybe
the
weren't
truth.
telling the truth?
I would tell
Okay.
the truth. I would tell the truth.
So I know I do agree that a lot of improvisation is not. But it's just also a matter of experience. A lot of the improvisation you see is probably they're doing something else. Also, they're just getting up there and being funny. And when that misses, that's horrible. When if
When
they're
they're
shooting,
trying for
yeah,
funny?
if you're shooting for funny and fail, it's disastrous below that. Just pitiful and desperate.
So there's always been this debate in Chicago comedy circles about this great divide between sketch comedy, right, and scripted sketch comedy that we think of as Saturday Night Live type material, and true improvisation, where one argument being that improvisation is a great tool to create scripted sketch comedy, and the other argument being that improv is a form of entertainment in itself. And generally speaking, the people that I've known who've thought that improv is a tool for itself have been a little weirder than the sketch comedy crowd, who've always been a little more their eye on the main chance.
All right.
What do you...
I believe both are true. I believe it's an excellent way to develop material, and in and of itself, it can be the entertainment.
So her book took her 10, 11 years, and so we originally started the question of, what was that moment where you found yourself going down the rabbit hole? So what is it that took you to put 10 years into one book?
Yeah, so this what moment thing I talk about with sort of everything I write, but I always, pretty much everything I've ever written can be traced back to one moment that made me stop and just go, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? And for me, the what moment with the Henrietta Lacks story was I was 16 and in a basic biology class, and my teacher said what most biology teachers say at some point, which is there are these amazing cells, and they've been alive since 1951, even though the woman they came from died shortly after the cells were taken, and they were one of the most important things that happened to medicine. He listed off some of the greatest hits, like her cells were used to create the polio vaccine. They went up in the first space missions to see what happened to human cells in zero gravity. Hers were the first cells ever cloned, the first genes ever mapped. Like all of our most important cancer medication came from these cells, the HPV vaccine, and the list just goes on and on. And all he knew about her was that she was black. And he wrote her name on the board and said she was black, and that was it, and class was over. And I was like, what? Like, why do we only know that? And who was she? And did she have any kids? And what do they think about all this?
Because
and
we've all benefited from those cells.
Yeah.
Every
There's not a single
cell,
person in the
this
world
room.
who hasn't benefited from these cells, and
Yes.
usually in multiple ways. Like, anybody have kids born through IVF, or they themselves are, you can thank Henrietta for that too. And like,
Wow.
just the list is endless, and nobody knew who she was. And what I didn't know at the time, this is where the sort of obsession thing came in, was, she didn't even know that these cells were taken. They were taken without her knowledge. No one ever told her family until about 25 years later, when her kids were used in research. And there was this enormous story behind this, but it was just that moment. What? How could one woman's cells be alive? At that point, it was, 40 years after she died, more than that. And did she have kids? What are they? And why do we only know she's black? Like, why is that the only piece of information we know?
And so what stops you when you decide that you want to write about something? Is it out of, I don't understand? Is that what you mean when you say, wait, what? Or is it just...
It's just curious. It's a
just
curiosity
a
mode.
hook that
I
gets you.
spend a lot of time speaking at schools, and I always tell students, and I think this applies no matter what field you're talking about, whether it's science, law, anything, sort of learning to hone that.
Yes.
To just actually take the time to stop and notice when you're curious about something. This is where great art comes from. I mean,
Yes, right.
And one of the stories that was one of my most widely circulated stories before the book was about goldfish surgery. And there's an entire field of veterinary medicine devoted to, you can do MRIs, CAT scans.
On goldfish?
On goldfish. Like
Huh.
10-cent, wanted
Yeah.
at the fair goldfish, because people love their fish and they get very attached to them. And
Oh, so people ask
Yeah.
for the MRIs.
Oh yeah. Oh
It's
yeah.
not research.
No. This is like veterinary medicine for your pet fish, and
Oh, I like that.
and I was just at the vet with my dog, sitting in the waiting room, and this guy came out. The vet came out from behind the desk, and he took off his gloves, and the woman behind the counter said, "How'd it go?" He said, "Great, patient's up, swimming around." I went, "What? What was your patient?" He's like, "It was a fish." Like, "What'd you do to it?" "I took a tumor off its nose." I'm like, "Why? And who paid for that? And how do you anesthetize a goldfish?" And I was just like bombarded with all these questions, and so it's just that moment of sort of letting yourself be the weird person who stops a total stranger and says, "Wait a minute, I'm sorry, did you just say? And can you tell me more?" Like, that's basically my job.
So to me, that's very interesting because that's an overlap with
Yeah.
improv, explore and heighten.
Yeah,
That's
and you were talking
basically-
about trust. I mean, it is,
Yes.
with improv and with all this, it's all about trusting your instincts and trusting the story, to just follow it wherever it's going to go. And it is a leap of faith, and you don't know. With you, it's your sort of the other people you're doing improv with and the audience. And with me, it's the people I'm writing about. Like, I don't know what they're going to say and where the story is going to veer off to, and you just have to...
So
Do it.
I'd be curious. So I'm okay if you say to me, "You've got an hour to write this," then I can pretty much knock it out in an hour. But if I don't have an hour to write it, I actually don't write anything.
Yes.
Yes, sure.
So I don't understand how you can actually sustain a project like that over a 10-year. What I would do is I'd wait 9 3/4 years. Then I'd start it. So you work. How did that?
And
so
you don't
actually-
think I did that? Yeah. No, that's the hardest thing for me about book writing, is this just mammoth thing that you have to do. And when you think about deadlines, you're like, I have to reply to some emails tomorrow, and I have to, there's some things I have to do logistically. I got to go to the bank. And in 10 years I have to turn in this thing. It just does not make it on the daily calendar all the time. And so you have to get into this. You just have to get into a place. I had this one editor of mine said this phrase to me, which was, I ended up writing it out and putting it on my computer. It said, "Do what's important, not what's urgent." And
That's helpful.
because it does feel like, the focusing on the thing that's important to you, as opposed to like, the emails in the inbox with the little exclamation point really are urgent.
I'm sorry
for
if that
someone.
was me. Was that me? Because that could have been me. Yeah.
But yeah, and that's really hard. And so I very much against my will started just waking up really early. I'm not a morning person, and this one writer friend of mine was like, "You have to wake up at 5 a.m. and just force yourself to write every day." And I was like, "That's insane. I'm not doing that." And he actually came to visit me at some point and woke up at 5 and woke my dog up, who woke me up, and I was like, "Fine, I'll try it." And I wrote more between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. that day than I'd written in months, and I was so pissed. And that's how I do it. That's when I have to do stuff.
How about like the depression that sets in when you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm wasting 10 years on a project that's not really going to get published.
Yeah.
Or the story is...
The critic really comes out. Okay.
I'm just saying, I would be terrified that the
Yeah.
whole thing was no good.
Yeah, and that happens all
That's
the
why
time.
you're a critic.
But what is that? That's not separate for me from a project. This whole thing might be a waste.
Even this whole thing?
Yeah, this whole thing. This whole thing. Yeah, this may well
Every
have
day?
been a waste.
Like for me, following the story is that. Like the story goes where the story goes, and I follow it, and yeah. But the sort of what you were saying, did I spend the entire day and I have like 3 words that I wrote? And how did that happen? And
Really?
like those
3
days,
words?
oh yeah, it happened. I hate writing. And this is something that most
Yeah, I do.
writers
I hate it. I hate
writing.
it too. I
Like
hate it
torture.
too.
You can ask my close friends and family are over there. You can ask them. Like my boyfriend, my office is in the attic, and he knows when I'm trying to write. 'Cause it's like, I'll sit down and type for a second, and then like pound, I'm pacing, I'm walking. I'm like, oh, I hate it, and I just hate it. It's awful.
Well, then,
the getting the words out the first. I love rewriting. I love it. Like revising, so much fun. Getting things
Wow.
out of my head the first time and onto a piece
You
of
need
paper
an
is
improv
torture.
partner who can help you.
I'm the exact opposite. Like
Right.
when I do write something, writing it the first time
Me
is
too.
so much fun,
Yes,
but
me
the
too.
rewriting is such a chore.
Yeah, no.
I already wrote that. Why would I do that again?
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, for all of you, but I'm going to start with Chef, what's the biggest lesson you've ever learned? Because you've been at your craft for quite a while now. And what's the thing that sticks with you that you say, like, okay, I got to remember, this is what I know?
Whoa.
Yes.
Right? It's heavy.
Really glad you're going
That's
first.
biggest lesson for me is patience, always, and it's not for cooking; it's for everything. My dad's a patient man, but he's got a huge temper. My mom's a patient woman, but she's got a huge temper too. And the two of them together always told me that if you're patient, everything will come. You'll be fine. So just be patient.
What is your background? Everyone's eating
I'm
their
a
frozen
Chicagoan.
kefir. No, I know. Your Pandel, what is that?
It's made up. Someone's brother down the way was a thief, and they changed the name and all this other stuff. So I'm Polish, Irish, English, and German.
Okay, so just all over
Yeah.
the map.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay, so patience, that's for you. Rebecca.
I have to go next?
No, you don't.
Oh.
We can pass it on to
You can take
David.
mine.
All right.
Sorry.
I guess just no matter how poorly it seems to be going, it's probably not going to kill me.
So you two will survive this.
Yes, I've had the worst evening anyone can have on stage.
No, I think I rival that because I had one in July. Where it's pretty bad. But okay, go ahead.
I'd give mine I'd toss mine in the ring, and it was awful.
What was
And
this?
where
What
was
was the
it?
specifics of
Yes,
this?
why-
Stand up. It was doing stand up. For like 40 minutes. I had to do 40 minutes, and I was dying from the first word. And it was at some country club that had Irish night once a week, and they had
Irish night?
Irish night.
But you
And
weren't on Irish night.
I was there and they have comedy on Irish night. And so it was in Indiana. It was truly I ran out of sweat. And it was the word, and I made it through that, and I think of that often. Oh, I made it through that. I made it through that.
Right,
That
yes.
was as bad as it could.
You
as it
live
could
to
get.
tell.
Yeah.
Yes, Chris.
I just think, you just have to tell the truth, right? You have to, that honesty, the saying what you feel, and I think truth changes over time, but I think saying what you really feel is that. And I also think in my business that most great shows are really about death.
Oh.
In
In the theater world.
Yeah, in the end, that we all leave this planet at a time and place not of our choosing. And I'm like the Grim Reaper, I know, but I think most of the time people go to the theater to understand better why they die and what they should achieve before they die. And most great plays are about that. I don't mean to
Inspiring
be a
people.
bummer, but I do think that to be the case.
But what you're saying is actually very inspirational. So it's trying to get people to get the most out of their life while
To
they're
live
still
in the
here.
moment,
Yes,
right.
right.
To live
yes.
in the moment.
Another big improv lesson
Yeah.
to be present.
Absolutely.
Yes. So is that your, not words of advice maybe, but we'll say that too, but also your biggest lesson, to live in the moment?
Yes, I find it very, very hard to do, but I think it's the right way to live.
Wow.
Okay, I
You've
think
got
I have
one now?
Okay, yeah. I think that probably for me, because I write nonfiction, so every one I write about is an actual person.
Yes.
A lot of them are alive, some of them are not, but I write about living, breathing people. And I think the big life lesson in that for me has been that it's so important to, even if you disagree with people, if you think people are kind of unfathomable to you in some ways, that it's sort of my job is to get into their skin and figure out what about them is completely normal and completely like me, and
Where you connect.
where you connect to people,
Yes.
because then even if we are coming from some completely different place, I have to feel like I actually understand where they're coming from in order to tell their stories, and
Yes.
embodying people who believe something entirely different from you, from what you believe, and really searching for the place in which they're human is very, it just changes you as a person, I think. So I'm repeatedly being changed by people by trying to really figure out how we're not different.
So you should run for politics, because
Right,
basically
yeah.
that's not anything that any politician
Yeah.
seems to be able to do lately.